welcome. We'll give it a few seconds to let everyone come on in. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. Looks like numbers are starting to level just a little bit. So we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Alexis Stokes. I am the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. We are excited to have you join us today as we talk about letters of recommendation and writing your statement of purpose. And you may be attending because you're preparing to apply for graduate school. You may also be attending because you are preparing to apply for undergraduate research opportunities for next summer. So we'll try to make sure to cover both of those as our panelists have had both of those experiences. And so we'll share some insights with you of how that has been for us. And I do want to let you know that closed captioning for today is available, so you can access that. We also are recording today's session. We will post this video to our website in the next couple of days, so you can keep an eye out for that. So why don't we just start with introductions, and I'll just go to Sophie because you are to my left.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I am a PhD student in Earth and Planetary Sciences, and I'm in my 5th year of the program. I study sea level change and essentially how ice sheets melt and change sea level across the globe. And I'm originally from the UK. I did my undergraduate degree at University of Liverpool, and I actually did a combined undergraduate and master's program with a year abroad. So I also spent a year at McGill University in Montreal. Was that everything I was supposed to say? Oh, and I went straight to grad school after I finished my master's program.
Thank you. We can go to Anna from there.
Hi, my name is Anna. I am a 6th year now in the same department as Sophie, Earth and Planetary Science. So it's my final year of my PhD. I think about Earth history questions in my research. So I spend a lot of time in the lab taking chemical measurements of rocks to understand how the environment has changed through time. And I started my PhD in 2015. I took a year in between my undergrad and grad school, and I did research for a year in a lab that I found during my undergrad. And I went to University of Chicago. Yeah, I think that's all the information.
Thank you. Lily?
Thanks. I'm Lily. I am in my 5th year of my PhD in computer science. My research is in new memory technologies and in how to design new hardware for computers. And my undergraduate degree is in computer science and physics from a liberal arts school. So I don't really have an engineering background, and I did go straight from my undergrad program to my PhD program with just a short couple-month internship in between.
Thank you. And Natalie?
Hi, my name is Natalie. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher in material science here at Harvard, and I'm working on 3D printing of materials for soft robotics. Prior to this, I did my PhD in materials science and engineering at UC Santa Barbara, where I also spent several years as a research fellow at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, doing my PhD research there. And then prior to that, I did my undergrad at the University of Washington in Seattle, also in material science, where I did undergrad research and internships at Boeing. And for all of that, I kind of went straight through from undergrad to grad school and to postdoc with a few months in between for moving or internships.
Thank you. And Jalila?
Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Jalila Mohammed, and I'm a second year grad student here in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And I'm majoring in material science and mechanical engineering. And my particular research, I focus on 3D printing liquid crystal elastomers and basically how that can be applied to soft matter robotics. And my undergrad was Southern University and A&M College, and I have a chemistry background. So before that, I didn't really do much engineering, but I did start my real engineering research at Harvard, actually, like in 2018. And so that kind of piqued my interest in doing engineering and all that. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. So we're really gonna, spend time today getting really some advice and expertise from our researchers and grad students around asking for letters of recommendation. How do you decide who to ask for those letters of recommendation? And then starting that process of the statement of purpose, both of which would be needed when applying for grad programs, master's or PhD, and applying for undergraduate research opportunities. So let's start with, how did you decide who should write your letters of recommendation? And then how did you go about approaching those people? And we can just, whoever wants to start first and jump in.
I can go first. I can be quick. I call myself a serial dabbler. I did a lot of different kinds of kind of research and one-off projects as an undergrad. So when I was looking for letter writers, even though they weren't really my closest academic advisors or they hadn't taught me as much, I sought out the people who I had either done research with or talked about projects and research with.
Others, did you follow the same path of looking for individuals you had done research with or could speak to your research experience?
Yeah, so I can chime in. I think for me, it kind of became an obvious choice that I would have to choose my master's thesis advisor. But to be fully honest, we didn't have the best relationship and we didn't see each other that frequently. And so I wasn't super confident of the reference letter that I would get. So for the two other reference letter writers, I really tried to kind of pick people that I'd either been in small courses with, or one of them actually was somebody that I'd done a small fieldwork program with. So I just wanted to make sure that they were really people that I had that closer connection with and that I could be more sure of the kind of reference letters they would write for me. And I think I approached them kind of by email ahead of time to let them know the kind of schools that I would be applying for and get a bit of advice before I kind of finally said, here's my plan, can you write me a reference letter?
Others, how'd you make that decision?
Yeah, I can also chime in. I think I did something similar to both of you guys. So I did undergrad research for about 3.5 years in one group. And so for that, I chose the professor that I'd worked with there. He was really awesome and we had a great relationship. So he was very happy to write it for me, which was great. And then for the other two letters of rec, I asked professors whose classes I'd been in, and these were like smaller classes where we had a lot of group discussions and there was time to get to know each other. And for those two professors, I also asked them for separate individual meetings, in part so that we could get to know each other better. And it was really nice because I could get their advice on applying to grad school and get their feedback on how I should tailor my application for different locations or different schools. And then it also gave them a chance to get to know me better and for me to share, why I wanted to go to grad school. And I think that was helpful since it's harder to get to know people when you're taking a class with them. And then I don't remember if I did this for grad school because it's been so long, but I've had to ask people to write letters of rec for several different things since then. And one thing that few people have asked for is essentially for me to write a draft of the letter. So you don't give your opinions of yourself or anything, but you can kind of write the full sentences that might support some statements they might make. And this allows you to kind of pick out the parts of your CV that you really want to have highlighted rather than giving them your whole long CV with like a bulleted list. And that can help them kind of frame the letter if they're not quite as familiar with all of your background for the last several years that you've been doing research.
Natalie, you made a good point that you've asked for letters of recommendation for various reasons outside of grad school. Can you share what are some other situations where you've had to ask for letters of rec?
Yeah, so for undergrad research, I asked for letters of rec getting started with that. In grad school, I asked for letters of rec for example, for my fellowship application for Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where I spent a few years. And then there were different kind of awards that you could apply for in grad school. Like in grad school, a lot of times you might go to a conference every year or so, and they might have like speaker awards. So you can present and then kind of be in like a student competition for speaking. And a lot of times those will ask for letters of rec. I think in grad school, I went to like a faculty prep seminar week thing where they kind of are recruiting people that are interested in becoming professors one day. That also required letters of rec. So this is something that kind of happens a lot even throughout grad school as well. And you want to ask kind of a bunch of different people that are related to the topic that you're applying for. Like this one was kind of focused on diversity. So I asked people who were more familiar with some of the work I'd done in the diversity area. And there you're asking people from so many different areas that it is really helpful to give them kind of this more draft letter so that they don't have to dig through your CV to find the specific details for what you're applying for.
I think, I don't know if I can go next. Okay, cool. I thought you were gonna like go move on, but yeah, for me, I think the main thing that the way I decided about who I should pick for my recommendation letters was mainly I was focusing on basically how it would look as far as like to the like whoever is like looking at my application, like who are the people who are these people who are like actually going to write good things about me. And so I thought about like people that were like in the higher, I guess higher name, I guess you'd say like a higher like a level of like and like administrators. So the first person that I talked to or like that I tried to network with once I got into like undergrad was like having a good relationship with like my dean. So like the dean of like my program in chemistry and in the College of Engineering and Sciences. And so like once I was able to do that, I think it was I found it easier for me to go talk to them and knowing that like they would have like that name as like, oh, you know, dean of like associate dean of like research programs or dean of like chemistry, then like that would kind of like I knew that that would kind of like put me in like a better position or in a good position where I could be seen like, oh, like these people who have have good experience with whatever I'm doing, like they look at her as like a well what's the word, like formidable person to uh be a part of our program. So that's the way I was looking at it. And because sometimes not all the times you have like research advisors who you may have good relationships with, so you need to have like I thought of it as like a way to like have a good footing with the people with the higher ups, I guess you would say. So like I would just say like for me it would be the like looking for like a good relationship with like the administrators of like your college and like make sure you have good footing with them. And so yeah, that was my way of.
So you bring up a good point of, not all of your letter writers will be individuals you've taken classes with. And so one of the questions that I've seen come in, a couple of people have asked did you ask for letters or even consider letters from individuals that were outside of engineering and the sciences? So maybe someone you took a Spanish course with, or you took a literature course
Yeah,
with?
actually, one of my reference letters for grad school came from an honors college recruiter. So I was recruited into honors college by one of the instructors in the honors college, but he had no experience of like engineering or like any background in science whatsoever. But I knew that I worked with him in like volunteering and like community service projects and all throughout my undergrad career. And so like, you don't really necessarily need to have someone who directly is like connected to your research per se. So like, like I chose my honors college recruiter, which is like basically like has a background in English. And but like they ended up writing a wonderful recommendation letter for me, and it worked out.
So when asking for your letters, how much time did you give your letter writers?
Is that for me or for everyone else?
Anyone that wants to jump in.
Well, I'll go. For me, I feel like it depends. It's better to always do it earliest as possible, but sometimes when if you have like time constraints, that may not always be the case. But I would say that if you know the people who you have an idea of who you want to write your who you would want to write your recommendation letter, I would say like if you know that this person is a very busy person and doesn't really have all the time in the world, definitely contact them first before you even start like whatever writing or statement of purpose you have. Like just email them first ahead of time saying, do you have time to write a recommendation letter for me? I've always asked any of like the people that I've asked recommendation letters for it. I would say I would give it like maybe like 3 weeks, depending on like how long I've known about the fellowship. I would say like 3 or 4 weeks beforehand, like I would give them an email saying like, hey, I'm applying for uh, this fellowship, or I'm applying for grad school. Do you have time, to possibly like write a recommendation letter for me? And then, if they get back to me, then, that's when I know. So like, I would always say like, give them a heads up first.
I will just echo that. I think it's important to give them as much time as possible, as early as you can, probably minimum of 2 to 3 weeks, but ideally like a couple months. And then if they ask, or you can suggest maybe if they ask for like a reminder a month or 3 weeks before, then that can be kind of helpful. And then another thing I forgot to mention, applying for at the same time as applying for grad school, the advice that I also got was to also apply to like every fellowship that would make sense for your field. So for STEM, it's a lot of like the NSF GRFP, like the Hertz Fellowship, the NDSEG Fellowship, and possibly for bio people, like NIH fellowships. I'm sure everyone else can list all the other fellowships in their fields. But those also require multiple letters of recommendation. And so it can be helpful once you know like all the fellowships you're going to apply to and all the schools, to put together a nice list for them that just says like the school, the link, or like an easy link to the email that they're going to get about it. And then like the deadline for it, because they're mostly going to use roughly the same letter for all of those, possibly 10 or 20 different things. And they'll have to upload each of them separately to all those different websites. So anything you can do to help it stay organized, I think they would probably appreciate.
So I think that's a good point of organizing that. It also helps you, because that same kind of chart or table that you create to pass over to that letter writer, it helps you to keep track of, here's what I'm applying for, here's the websites, here are the deadlines that I have to have everything submitted. I did something similar when I was applying. I even kept in that spreadsheet for myself, when did I ask someone? So then I knew maybe when I needed to send a reminder to them as well, or check in with them about the letter that they had agreed to write. Did you, and some of you have mentioned this as far as maybe providing a draft letter, providing your statement of purpose or CV. Were there other things that maybe you provided that person when you asked them to write your letter to kind of help them with that?
I think this might be specific to me, but when I was doing my grad school applications, I was applying to a mix of like CS departments and computer engineering type research groups. So I kind of had two lists of applications, and at least for my computer science professors that I was asking for recommendations, I actually explicitly told them like, hey, if you're at all able to tailor your recommendation more towards this research project rather than that one, for this list of applications rather than that one, I'd appreciate it. But I also, you don't want to ask them to write two letters. So unless you know them really, really well, it's not something that's necessarily applicable.
So can we think about that and kind of order of things? Did you write your statement of purpose before starting the letter of recommendation asking process, or in the reverse?
I think for me, it was kind of around the same time. So when I was kind of like filling out which places I would apply for, I started to put together kind of an outline for my statement of purpose. And then at the same time, I was going through that process of like, you know, figuring out who my reference writers were going to be and asking them permission. And then kind of a little later on, I sent them actually a full draft of my statements of purpose when I kind of confirmed, you know, 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time that they would write that reference for me. And yeah, as we've kind of touched on, different people have different schedules, and one of my reference letter writers did not submit the reference until an hour before the deadline. So I think the more warning and the more reminders, if they're comfortable with that, you can send, the better. One quick thing I also wanted to say, just in relation to what Natalie said, I think checking out the kind of fellowships and funding you can apply for is great. For international students, that's not necessarily required. And actually, unfortunately, a lot of the fellowships that Natalie mentioned are not eligible for students just moving from overseas to the US. So that's just something to bear in mind.
That's a good point. Thank you for noting that. Others, was there a certain order you took in statement of purpose, letter of recommendation?
I wrote my statement of purpose at the last minute, which I wouldn't recommend.
And the other good point that has come out of this conversation is around, you know, not just your deadline, but then paying attention to some of the programs will specify if the letters of recommendation also need to be in by your deadline, or whether or not the letters of recommendation can come in after your application deadline. So paying attention to that and making sure that you communicate to your letter writers what that deadline is. So then kind of while we're talking about, oh, go ahead, Julia.
I was going to say, like, even though, yes, that is the case, I would still treat it as if you would want them to have it in before or at that specified deadline, because, you know, so many things could go wrong with that. And, you know, it would be safer if you were just, just coming from my own experience, it would be safer to treat it as, you know, you want them to have it in at the same time as the actual application. Yeah.
Good point. So with your statement of purpose, and I know Sophie mentioned she wrote an outline for hers first. Did others follow a similar path in writing their statement of purpose?
I would say I didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. You're gonna go, Natalie. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I should have, but I asked other grad students. That was to me my outline. I fortunately I knew like one or two grad students uh that went here to Harvard, and I was like, oh, like what did y'all send to apply to grad school? Like, what? So it's to me, it's like I'm going towards to the source. So like I just thought like, oh, like this is how they did it. Like let me see like how I can like rearrange and like make things like fit me. And yeah, that was so my template was just other grad student other grad students statements of purpose.
That is a good point. Did others look at examples?
Yeah, so I also looked at a lot of different examples for the statement of purpose for grad school as well as for fellowships. And I kind of noticed, I guess, patterns. I think there's lots of different approaches to take to a statement of purpose. But kind of the basic outline that I noticed across a lot of them was the first part was kind of how or why you became interested in a particular field, what motivates you, inspires you, drives you, interests you. That's kind of like how a lot of them started. And then I noticed that a lot of them then went into kind of listing your experience so far, listing your accomplishments, describing your undergrad research, your projects that you did in your classes that were very like research oriented, and kind of providing the evidence to support that you are qualified and have shown dedication and passion for this area that you want to pursue further education in. And then usually like the third part was kind of your vision or your interests and goals for the future. And these could be very different than what you did in undergrad even. But just saying like, this is how I'd like to move forward. And this is kind of the types of projects I'm interested in. And then usually like the final part, which was like usually the part that was different for each school from the examples I saw, was like a final paragraph saying like why this school or program is the right fit for your interests and goals. And then usually name like 2 or 3 professors whose research groups would be really good for the type of work you're interested in. And then that shows, because there'll be professors that are reading these and they'll be able to see, oh, she's interested in these few groups. That makes perfect sense with her background or her goals. I think that was kind of the recipe that I noticed for a lot of them. Other people might have noticed different recipes, but they all seem to contain like those 4 things possibly woven together. And yeah, so I kind of went off of that and then tried to fill in those blanks for myself and make it a little bit more personal, building off of that outline.
What would you say is kind of the most important thing to mention in that statement of purpose?
I mean, I think the sort of outline that Natalie gave was really great. I think maybe the most important thing, or the thing that I've heard my advisors speak about as the most important thing sitting on the other side, is why and how did you develop the interest that you're applying for? You don't have to know exactly what kind of research project you want to do. I think what someone's looking for in a statement of purpose is usually, are you excited to do research at all, like in general? And then why are you excited about the specific topic or field, or if you are specializing your statements, the specific research groups that you're mentioning. And as long as you can explain that in a genuine way, either it's a class project you did that led you down a path, or something you read, whatever it is, I think that coming through is probably the most important thing.
And for those that may have done some things before going into grad school, how did you go about with go back to the letters of recommendation and asking someone if you hadn't been in, that institution for a while? So maybe you went to another institution, did a master's, but you really wanted someone from your undergrad to write that letter of recommendation, but hadn't spoken to them for a couple of years, or you worked in industry or did research for a while and you were going back to that faculty member. How did you approach that person?
Yeah, so I wasn't really out of school for that long before I guess I asked my letter writers if they could write a letter for me, but I would just say, again, which we've already kind of said, just give them as much detail as you can. I'm sure that they will at least like sort of remember you, and then like giving them things like your CV, I took this class with you. These are the kind of details of like what I want to be highlighted in my letter. All of that information really helps them. So.
So one of the questions we've had to come in from the audience is, how many programs did you apply for? And would it be bad to ask a letter writer to submit letters for 10 plus applications?
For me, I applied to around 7 or 8. My plan was 10, but I shortened it down to 7 or 8. But like I said, like about the like asking for a letter of recommendation, I feel like it's within your right to ask them, like, are you willing to tell them, hey, I plan on applying to 10 or more institutions, and give them a heads up, like, I know you are pretty busy, but would you be okay with doing more than 10 recommendation letters for me? And that you kind of like putting the ball in their court. So I think that's like a more than like you know once I feel like if you are kind of coming at them with a more like asking them at first, like, taking the time out of your day to like do all of this for me, like, give them a heads up first. That's all. Yeah. But wait before the deadline, please.
Others, how many programs did you apply for?
I was similar to Jalila, I think like 7-ish. And I basically, I had a longer list, and I took it to like one of my undergraduate advisors, and I was like, you know me, what shouldn't be on this list? And that's how I cut my list. So if you have a person like that in your life, that can be helpful.
I think I only applied to 4 different programs. And I think one of my considerations was I'd kind of reached out to different professors beforehand to kind of, learn more about what they were working on and see if they did have an interest in me personally. And so I only applied to the 4 places where I actually had a professor like reply and encourage me to apply. And I think in a way it was good applying to fewer institutions, because then it gave me more kind of focus about the research that I wanted to do in my statement of interest, because I really had narrowed down like there's these people that I want to work with on these specific projects. But I think I'm probably the extreme rather than the norm. I think people tend to apply to a few more.
Yeah, I also applied to 4 programs, and I agree with Sophie. Like, I think I had kind of taken time to narrow down more the exact type of research that I wanted to do, so that was why it was kind of smaller.
And did you ask for these letters in person or primarily by email?
So I think with one of the people I was a little closer to, and I asked for them for some feedback on my statement of interest, and I asked them in person and kind of discussed the whole process with them more in person. But the other two I did ask by email, yeah.
I think I asked everyone by email just to give them some time to kind of process the list. I kind of listed the number of schools. I think it was something like 8 to 10 that I was applying to, and then kind of gave them the deadlines. And I think, yeah, all over email, just because for them, I felt like it might give them some time to like look at their schedule and think about whether or not they would have time to do it.
Yeah, for me, I did the opposite. I went to all of them in person, mainly because I just felt like I wanted to get a confirmation like right then. So that was just, I felt like I was like, oh, if I get an answer from them now, or tell them now and then have them think about it later, and then I can send them an email saying like, hey, like, what did you think about, our meeting today about doing a recommendation letter for me? Yeah, so that was the way I did it.
Did any of you, so when you're filling out that application and it asks you about if you want to be able to see your letters of recommendation or keep them private, did any of you opt to see your letters of recommendation, or did you feel like that might influence anything if you did ask to see them?
I think it seems like that's something that Harvard is a bit alone in. I didn't have other programs that gave me that option. And so I kind of figured that maybe it would be best to not. And I also think I wouldn't necessarily think it would be best for me to read them, because it also might color how I feel about those people. So yeah, I left it completely anonymous.
Yeah, actually so I didn't even know about the whole like what that meant to other professors. So like the first few like applications, I didn't keep it anonymous. And I was like, oh, like, sure, I want to see, but like I was never thinking like, oh, like maybe that may like, because the professors may like see that and be like, oh, like they don't trust me. I don't know. So like I remember like whenever I went to one of the professors who did a recommendation letter for me, and like they told me about like, hey, like, just for the heads up, like maybe for the next time, like keep it anonymous. So you don't want to. I was like, well, why? I wanted to see. He was like, yeah, but it's more so of like a trust thing. Like you don't want to like give off the wrong idea to a professor. Like, it's more of just like out of a respect thing to keep it anonymous, really. So that's what I learned like from my experience. But, I don't know if any of others had, any different experiences with that.
Yeah, when I was applying, I don't remember having that option ever, so I don't. Yeah, I think they're all by default anonymous.
Yeah, that's what I remember too. I don't remember
Yeah.
being given that option. I
think Harvard was
I'll
the only
always
one
wonder.
that did that.
Okay. So what I did when I asked them for the letter was I kind of worded my email a bit specifically saying, would you be willing to write me a strong letter of recommendation? They say yes. I feel like, it's good to ask people that you believe will write you a strong letter of recommendation to begin with. But if they don't feel like they can, that gives them an opportunity to say, hey, I don't think I know you well enough, or we didn't get to know each other that well in these classes, or I'm not familiar enough with your work, so I think you should ask someone else. If you put like the word strong in there, then that gives them an opportunity to kind of explain why they might not be the best. And if they say yes, it can kind of maybe give you that comfort because you won't get to read them of knowing that it's probably going to be a strong letter if they said yes.
When you approached your letter writers, did you already know all the schools that you were planning to apply to? Would you recommend that someone start that conversation without knowing yet all the schools that they plan to apply to?
I definitely didn't have my list finalized when I asked for my letters, and I don't think you need to. I think you should just have a ballpark so they know how many times they're going to have to click and submit and maybe when the first deadline is. But as long as you have those two pieces of information, I think that's enough. But others can feel free to disagree with me.
No, I agree. I definitely agree with that approach. Yeah, I didn't have like a full cohesive list. I mean, technically I did, but like I always like switched out like maybe this school with this with that school, but I still kept it around like the same number of schools. So whoever was writing my recommendation letters, they knew how many, 7 or 8, 6. So that was pretty much, yeah, all they really needed to know until like they got the little email saying that they had to send the recommendation letter.
We have a question from the audience that says, I'm an international student and personal letters or statement of purpose are not common in the country I come from. As a consequence, I do not understand how professional or personal the letter should be. Could each of you describe the tone and structure you used in your statement of purpose, and what would be your advice to an international student that doesn't have any idea how to start?
Yeah, so I guess straight away I'll just say I was in a similar situation and it's daunting. I had one statement of purpose from a friend who was applying to a PhD program in the UK, and honestly it was kind of like less relevant to what I was doing. So if you are in that situation where you don't have people to reach out to look at those statements of purposes, maybe reach out to Alexis and maybe we can set you up with a few. I'm personally happy to share mine. I think some of the other panelists might be too. And yeah, I think also if you have, if there's any professors or lecturers within your department who have been through this kind of process with students previously, or any of them who have studied abroad, that might be a good place to seek mentorship and get a little feedback if possible. In general, I would say the tone of my statement was relatively professional. I kind of tried to detail, highlight the things that I felt were really my key accomplishments and the key skills that I had. If you have research experience, highlight that. If you don't, that's fine too, but maybe highlight some of the key skills that you've learned from your classes that will then be applicable to the research that you're doing. Yeah, I guess others probably have things to add on that.
So we have one question that is not really specifically about letters of recommendation or a statement of purpose, but what motivated each of you to apply to graduate school? Or did you just kind of always know that this was the path you were going to take?
Yeah, I was trying to think of an answer to that one. So I'm definitely coming from a background where like I know a lot of people in research, so it felt normal. But I wrote about how I applied to earth science programs, and I wrote about how like even from a young age, I was always interested in rocks and the environment. And especially like now with our world is changing so fast, like I think it's important that we have people who are really knowledgeable about the science behind climate change. So I think any kind of like personal connection you feel to like the research that you're interested in could be cool, or just like, oh, I enjoy thinking about this topic. It really excites me.
Yeah, I think what motivated me is I got introduced to computer architecture and like the kind of hard engineering that I ended up being really interested in pretty late in my undergrad. And at first it was just like, well, I like doing research. I like this new topic I don't know as much about. I should try to find an opportunity to do this more and to get myself skills and experience in this area. And an academic track and doing a PhD seemed like a great way to do that since I liked research. I will also circle back to the other question and say that my statement of purpose was also, it was very personal, kind of like what Anna was saying. And I would definitely suggest, like, if you have personal elements that are also related to why you're interested, or like how you've developed your interests over time, even if it's through extracurriculars or through things outside of classes, that can inform your worldview and be appropriate in a statement of purpose too. You just have to also hit the technical, these are things I've done that are relevant parts too.
Yeah, I agree with Lily. I think for me, it was weird because I didn't actually, majority of my life, I wasn't even planning on going to grad school. I was kind of thinking of, I was kind of leaning towards the industry side of things until I started an actual internship here, and that kind of like switched my brain. I was like, oh, like I can actually get farther. If I wanted to do industry, I could go farther with, you know, pursuing a higher education past a bachelor's degree, you know, with like doing like if I wanted to just get like a master's, like you can, you know, have so many other opportunities opened for you, you know, besides just like going strictly to industry after undergrad. So that was really like what I saw into that. And yeah, I guess for like the personal side, I think, to go back to the other question, so I've noticed that like sometimes like we interchange like personal statement and statement of purpose. So like I would say that it depends really on this, like the requirements of the school, but like a personal statement from what I've known is like more so of your like, I guess, what was your passion for this? Like what kind of it really dictates like what made you want to stick to this as something that you want to do for the rest of your life. And a statement of purpose is really similar to that, but more so of a professional way, a more professional tone. So like for me, I like put it in words of saying like, oh, like I always had like a fond inquisition for, yeah, big words, inquisition for like learning about uh like science at a very young age and like being very hands on. And so like talking about maybe like you would do like volunteer work at like a like for me, I think I said like I did like volunteer like demos and stuff like for little children like during in high school and stuff. And so like it's kind of like gives you more of a background of like, you know, your passion really of like what you know, what certain things that you like did that kind of cultivated this love of whatever you're doing to what it is now. Yeah, that was very, you know, nicely put. Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions about kind of your experience now that you are in grad school or have completed grad school and are a postdoc. But how are the support in being a woman within academia and in grad school and as a researcher? What are some of the resources you've tapped into, whether they be organizations or offices on campus, and how has that been helpful? Or maybe are there organizations that you would like to see be present as a support and resource?
So I think that in terms of being a woman in STEM, we do have good resources in HGWise, which is, I forget what the acronym exactly stands for, Harvard Graduate Women in Science and Engineering, maybe? I think that's right. And they kind of run various different events, from just kind of networking and getting to know your peers, to career development, to various different opportunities to interact with professors and people in industry at different levels, to kind of learn more about what your future could be in STEM, which is a really great way to kind of network and work on your career and maybe gain some mentorship, as well as just get to know other women in STEM at Harvard, which is cool. I think in terms of being an international student as well, Harvard at the moment, hopefully this continues into the future, has a large body of international students. And, you know, in my first year, quite a lot of my best friends were also international students. So there is kind of a good international community. There's a lot of support for international students, you know, through the visa process with the Harvard International Office. Yeah, and at various different kind of events organized through the graduate student dorms that are, you know, kind of to create community between international students and students that live in the dorms, and kind of across campus as well.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with Sophie. Like there's one specifically for women in science with HGWise. And like for me, I would say like this is more of a personal thing, that I was really trying to look for like the specific lane for the minorities. And I would say that especially in STEM, that's still overall, that's still a lacking thing overall with a lot of the institutions. But for here, I would say that there are, so like you have like, of course, like whenever I first got in here, like I learned about the Graduate Society of Arts and Sciences, W.E.B. Du Bois Society, which is it's basically just a collection of like all the POC students that are under the GSAS program, and like they always like give you like a lot of resources when it comes to like maneuvering grad school as a minority student. And like also they have like different like panel discussions that they often like hold like at certain times of the year, and just like different like resources for you when it comes to like specifically like women, minority women in science. And I know like for like there's a recent one that like I'm actually a part of, a executive member of the Graduate Society of Underrepresented Students in STEM. So that's like specifically meant for POC students in STEM. So yeah, like we have like those like under the umbrella of GSAS. And so yeah, I would say that like I think that is very important to like look for those like resources, and like, you know, make sure like you have like that type of, I guess, like fellowship with like other, you know, STEM students that are like that look like you or that have the same interest as you, because like, you know, grad school is hard. And so like, you know, I would say, you know, that's like a very important thing to have.
Kind of going back to the statement of purpose, one of the questions you received was around the length. So on average, how long would you say your statement of purpose was?
I think mine was about 1.5 pages.
I seem to remember that some required it to be just a page. I remember really squeezing.
Same
I
here.
think, yeah, it was about a page, no more than 2, I would say. But yeah.
Yeah, same for me, about a page.
And then
Yeah,
another
squeeze some stuff
question,
in.
another question we received was, did anyone take classes online prior to, so of course we're all taking classes online now, but prior to in maybe in undergrad or in your master's program, did you take classes online, and have you ever asked any of those faculty to write a letter for you?
I think, so I haven't taken any classes online until this year, but I did ask a professor who was kind of like teaching a big lecture class, and I felt nervous because I wasn't sure that she would know me well enough to write a letter. But I think you'd be surprised at the things that they could write in a letter about you. Like, I think that they're definitely, if you have been to office hours, even just like by the performance, your performance in the class, like there are things that they can say. And I think, like someone had mentioned earlier, also, if they feel like they don't have enough to go off of, they'll probably let you know and say, I don't think I can write a letter for you. So I don't think it would hurt to ask.
And I want to be mindful of time. And so maybe we can go around as kind of our last question. Is there something you wish that someone would have told you about applying to graduate school now that you are in school or have completed graduate school? If you look back and you're like, I really wish someone would have told me this about applying.
Oh, I can go. I have a quick one, I think, is that you can just email people. I feel like I didn't know that as an undergraduate, but if you are on a professor's website and you're like, oh, wow, this is definitely the research I want to be doing, or I at least want to learn more about that, send them an email, and send them an email that says like, hey, can you connect me with one of your graduate students? So it's not even like you're asking for a ton of their time. That's what I'd suggest.
Yeah, I think Lily's point is great. And as well as realizing that you can email people, realizing that half of professors are just normal people. Like they, they get busy. They might not respond to your email because they're busy, but they might do eventually, and they'll probably say something really nice. Like I think I kind of like put people like that on a pedestal when I was applying, and didn't kind of, I don't know, I got very nervous about it, and took a lot of time to write emails and feel comfortable about it. But at the end of the day, they are just normal people.
And one other question I just saw come in that I thought would actually be a good kind of final question too, if someone wants to share, what are your plans after grad school or after your postdoc is complete? What are your plans?
So after I finish my PhD, hopefully this year, my plan is to start a postdoc at Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico, which is exciting. Seems like I'll be staying in the US for a while, so.
Anyone else kind of know what your plans may be?
Yeah, my plans are also to stay in research. So I'm applying to different postdoc positions now, and also looking outside of academia to government research labs. There's all these different Geological Survey, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, all these different research labs that are government paid jobs. So.
Thank you. Which I think you all both bring up a good point and a good topic for another session that we may try to do in the spring around looking for postdoc positions and applying for those, because that's another area of academia that really does have a hidden curriculum and doesn't really make it clear of how you pursue those postdoc opportunities and become a faculty member. So that may be a topic for a future session. I want to first thank the panelists for joining us today and dedicating your time. I know you're extremely busy with classes and with your research right now, so I definitely appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thank you to the attendees for joining us today as well. Again, give us a couple days. We'll post this onto our website. You also, and I know Veronica in the background, thank you to Veronica on helping us on the back end of this. And she also provided the website where you can find the video. You'll also find other videos, and we will continue to do sessions like this and post them to our website for individuals to have access to. I will put my email address into the chat. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or want to be kind of connected to anyone within the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences or Earth and Planetary Science program. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. Have a great evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you.